very important. So inshallah, that's going to be really exciting. I'm going to take you to some websites later on because I prepared for that. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. So inshallah, today we're going to be doing a tashahud. But before that, I forgot that we didn't do this dua. Let's look into it really quick. So we did dua sujood al-tilawa. Okay. سجد وجهي للذي خلقه وشق سمعه وبصره بحوله وقوته فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. We did that one. Okay. But we didn't do this one. اللهم اكتب لي بها عندك أجرا وضع عني بها وزرا واجعلها لي عندك ذخرا وتقبلها مني كما تقبلتها من عبدك داود. Let's look into that one right there. He said الترمذي الحاكم صححه ووافقه الذهبي. Okay. So now you know that the reference for it, but that doesn't necessarily make it authentic, but at least we know what the reference is. اللهم اكتب لي بها عندك أجرا. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the dua. Okay. So if you were to just make اللهم اكتب لي بها عندك أجرا just randomly like that, what are you talking about? There's a pronoun here. What is this referring to? Okay, so that's why it's important. The other day, someone asked if we could do different selections of dua and then put them together. And I came across this short reel of a little girl learning how to do dua الطعام. You know, اللهم بارك لنا فيما رزقتنا وقنا عذاب النار. So what did she do? She basically said, Allahumma barik lana, and then she said an-nar, because she missed out on all the other du'as. So what does that make her say? Well, that would mean that she wants an increase in fire.
Ya Allah, that's scary.
That's scary. But it's a little girl, of course, she's learning. So she took the beginning of the dua and the end of the dua and boom, right there, mixed them together. Okay, so that's why it's important to learn the words and what you're actually saying, because you could be selectively making wrong statements without you realizing. So Allahumma aktub li, what is that? That's basically in sujood, you can make that dua in sujood. Allahumma aktub li biha indaka ajra. The word Allahumma is ism fa'il. What does that mean? It's basically like an adjective, okay? Like an adjective. And Ya Allah, oh Allah. Uktub, what is uktub? Uktub means write. So you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to write that down for you. That refers to Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. That's what that is referring to. You're saying Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. When in your sujood, since that's what you're saying, Ya Allah, let and write that statement that I had just said as a word that you would reward me for. Say it. And where? عندك. I want you to preserve it for me. Where's عندك? In Jannah. The other day I was asked a question. Is there a contradictory between me wanting Jannah and between me wanting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be content over me? There's no contradiction. Why not? Because the way to get to Jannah is by basically going past Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being content over you. You know, some people have the paranoia and they're wondering, oh, what if this, but I want to get to Jannah. Well, the way to get to Jannah is by letting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making, or you basically living up to the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being content over you. Okay. Uktub li biha indaka ajra. Right? For the word that I had said, a reward for what I had just basically praised you with. وضع عني بها وزرا. ضع عني. When you say ضع means to put. So what are we putting? ضع عني. العن means when something is a burden. So you're saying, Ya Allah, remove the burden of the implication of al-wizr, of sin. So uplift the burden of sin off of me with the word that I had just said, which is Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. وَاجْعَلْهَا لِي عِنْدَكَ ذُخْرًا. وَاجْعَلْهَا, and make it for me something that you would preserve for me. What is it? ذُخْر?
That's so beautiful, Ya Allah.
It's like, preserve it for me. Let it be a word that you would keep for me. It's kind of like when you would, put something in your bank. You would put something, you're not using that money now, but you're keeping it away. You're making it the treasure. A what?
Deposit.
Deposit, okay. Like a deposit, you're keeping it away, like a treasure. You're keeping it for those times when you would probably be in deficit with good deeds. So this would come in to basically make up for that deficit. وتقبلها مني كما تقبلتها من عبدك داود. And accept it from me the way that you had accepted it from your servant Dawood. He accepted it from servant Dawood. In Surah Sad, about Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether in Surah Sad, Surah Sad is one of those very lovely surahs, and I would say abandoned surahs by many. But Surah Sad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. Let's go to Surah Sad for a bit, really quick right there, and just see why Abdika Dawood, why Dawood alayhi salam out of all. Okay, Surah Sad would be Sad wal Qur'an dhikr bal alladhina kafaru. Let's see, I'm gonna find it right there. Here we go. We found it. Okay, bal alladhina kafaru fi izzati wa shiqaq. Okay, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's continue right there. All right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. اصبر ما على ما يقولون واذكر عبدنا داود ذا الأيدي إنه أواب. Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, it was basically ذا الأيدي, metaphorical. It doesn't mean he had multiple hands. It just means it's a metaphor that he basically had a lot of power. Was that military power? Political power? What kind of power? Innahu awab. But despite all the power that he had, he was an obedient servant to the Lord Almighty. Look at this one. Inna sakharna al-jibala ma'ahu yusabbihna bil-'ashiyyi wal-ishraq. Ya salam. Look at this one. This is the quote that I was wanting to get to. Inna sakharna al-jibala ma'ah. The mountains. Al-jibal would work for him. Al-Jibal would work for Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. But what kind of work? They would do the work of tasbih. What is that work? The work of dhikr. The word of dhikr would make the sound, and throughout the mountain he would make the dhikr, and the echo of his dhikr is basically touching the mountains, and the mountains would sing along the hymns of tasbih bil-'ashiyyi wal-ishraq, throughout the night and throughout the day. It would all sing the song of tasbih with Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. وشددنا ملكه وآتيناه الحكمة وفصل الخطاب. Not only that, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had والطير محشورة كل له أواب. And not only were the mountains basically doing that tasbih, but even the birds were mahshura. They were basically محشورة, they were basically under his control. كل له أواب, they were all at her service. وشددنا ملكه, and he was given basically a strong power, strong monarchy, strong kingdom. وآتيناه الحكمة, and he was granted wisdom. وفصل الخطاب. Why فصل الخطاب? فصل الخطاب, not everyone has the skill to eloquence, speak in eloquence, and be capable of understanding what is in between the lines. And in order to be, that's why you would find diplomats, for example, politicians, they're capable of using words in ways to make sihr, in ways to make magic. We're not talking about black magic, but we're actually talking about rhetorics and narratives and using words where it would just contain you. And without you realizing, you'd be like, how did this happen? Why did I believe this person? They just have ways to use words to manipulate others. That's basically a politician. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in regards to Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, said, "Sharadna mulkahu," giving him the kingdom, giving him the power, and we had given him the wisdom and the ability, fasl al-khitab. He was capable of delivering outstanding speeches, and he was capable of reading in between the lines and seeing in between the words what the words contain.
Is it as we say it in Arabic, fitna, fatin?
الفطنة would basically be more in intelligence. الفصل الخطاب is basically the rhetoric. Okay? الخطاب is rhetoric. What rhetoric? It's so easy when you would go to court. You would hear this person and you would hear that person and they would be talking and you would really get lost in between the words to know who really is the one that is guilty and who is innocent.
Hujjah.
But when you're in a place, in a position, when you're in a position of a judge, and both are speaking to defend their point of view, to prove their innocence, things become so murky, you're not capable of distinguishing right from wrong. Everybody is seeming so eloquent, everybody is seeming so smart and so intelligent in bringing in the evidence to prove themselves as innocent. So fasl al-khitab is to distinguish right from wrong and to distinguish and recognize in between the lines how to get to truth. And that's why it tells us the story, but we're not going to get to that story, okay? Because we're basically going to do this one. وَتَقَبَّلْهَا مِنِّي كَمَا تَقَبَّلْتَهَا مِنْ عَبْدِكَ دَاوُد. Accept it from me the way you had accepted the dhikr, the tasbih from Dawood alayhi salam when he was يُسَبِّحْنَ بِالْعَشِيِّ وَالْإِشْرَاقِ, when he was making the tasbih, the mountains would sing along in tasbih and all of that. That's the kind of tasbih that I want you to accept and hear from me while I'm doing in this sujood. Okay, so that's basically that dua. اللهم اكتب لي بها عندك أجرا وضع عني بها وزرا واجعلها لي عندك ذخرا وتقبلها مني كما تقبلتها من عبدك داود. Okay, now we're going to go for التشهد. التشهد it needs some details. What is التشهد? التشهد, the root is شاهدا. شاهدا actually means to witness. Okay, let me read it first. التحيات لله والصلوات والطيبات. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله not أن أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن this one is أن وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله محمدا عبده ورسوله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Okay, so when we look at this one should look at number 2. It says al-Bukhari مع الفتح and Muslim. But I actually wanted to take you to, because I know some of you would know a different kind of tashahud. So what I thought would be a good idea is to lay out the different narrations for tashahud. So the Prophet ﷺ had taught the Sahaba how to do the tashahud and include it within the prayer. Note, to say the tashahud in the last rak'ah or in the second rak'ah, it's obligatory in both the second and the last if we're talking about a 4 rak'ah prayer, or if we're talking about witr, because in witr, in a 3 rak'ah witr, in the second rak'ah, you don't do the tashahud. Okay? You don't do the tashahud if you're doing it a 3 rak'ah one, because the Prophet ﷺ forbid that we would make our witr like maghrib. Okay, so let's look into this one. We've got 3 different kinds of tashahud. You had the tashahud that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud basically narrated, and you could see that it was narrated in Bukhari and Muslim, meaning it's authentic. Okay, and you could see there's the tashahud that Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab he basically did, and you could say that it was narrated by Abu Dawood, and it was regarded as authentic by al-Albani. Okay, and you also have the last tashahud, which Umar ibn al-Khattab had basically taught people while he was on the pulpit. And that one was narrated by Imam Malik and basically regarded as Sahih by al-Albani. So, just by looking at these references, we would right away know that this one is the preferred dua. Okay, let's look into it. Okay, let's see the differences. التحيات لله والصلوات الطيبات السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Let's look at the other one. The other one, التحيات
You said that's the preferred one?
That's the preferred one. Why? Because
yes,
it was
that's the one I know.
Oh, alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar ولله الحمد. Allah يتقبل. Let's see. The other one, it's not wrong, but it was basically narrated by Ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab. التحيات لله الصلوات الطيبات السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. So that's really similar to the one on top. Okay, the only differences, let's kind of write down. I hope this allows me to scribble right here. I know there's a way to scribble. Hold on, where is that scribbling thing? No, there's a way to scribble here. How do you do that? Whatever. Okay, we'll use a different kind of scribbling. Okay, so the difference is وحده لا شريك له. Okay, وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. So basically that was the only difference. Am I right? Yes, it's the only difference. Let's look at the last one. التحيات لله الزاكيات لله. That's a different one. الطيبات لله الصلوات لله. Notice the wording is different. التحيات لله, up until here, that's the same thing. الزاكيات لله, الطيبات لله, الصلوات لله. How is that different from this one? So basically, as-salawatu lillah, at-tayyibatu lillah, az-zakiyatu lillah. So what you're basically doing, you're giving that emphasis. You're pretty much saying the same thing, but you're just giving that emphasis. Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So basically up until here, this is the same thing. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillah salihin. Basically the same thing as that one. Ashhadu an la ilaha وعلى عبادة أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله محمد عبده ورسوله. So the only difference comparing that one to that one is basically up this sentence right here. Okay, and this one was basically including them all. الصلوات الطيبات, right? الصلوات الطيبات, and basically تحيات له والصلوات والطيبات, basically including it all, that it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and here emphasizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala each and every single one. Okay, so just an idea of what those the different tashahud. Well, what about Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad? You know, what is called the Salat al-Ibrahimiyya. Let's see, two different ones. Let's say right there. The first one, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Okay, let's see the other one. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. So just a slight difference. Okay, but you could say this one's narrated by Bukhari, this one's narrated by Muslim. So whether you go by this dua or by that one, it's basically fine. Well, what does it mean anyways? That's what we're trying to do. We're going to get to knowing what these mean. So let's go up there and actually get this. Okay, so what I did was basically go to a beautiful website that basically did the job for me. Instead of me doing the job from scratch, they basically did a really good job and said, you know what, I'm going to do the job for you. And the good news is that right now, during the, you know, the age of AI, I could just go right here and just say translate, and it would translate it for me. And if you just give me just a little bit of space, and I'll show you how this would actually translate it. And it would be really easy, but I'm not going to use that translation because I don't know how to use that translation. Certainly, here's that translation, but I don't entirely believe in the translation. I like to go to the Arabic language. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted me with Arabic. So let's go with the Arabic. So who is the preferred tashahud? We said that the preferred tashahud was basically this one. So that's the one we're basically going to give that that at least sharh. Let's see. When you say at-tahiyyatu lillah, what is at-tahiyyatu lillah? So the word at-tahiyyat, it basically is plural of tahiyya. So what does that mean? Does that mean we're basically giving like salutations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are we doing greetings to Allah? Are we saying peace be upon Allah? The answer is no. They used to do that and say at-tahiyyatu assalamu ala Allah, but then the Prophet ﷺ forbid them, and he said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is peace. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would in no way go in any form or shape of any type of default, or basically in any way and becoming basically needing anything to, in other words, in no way will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala get into any imperfection, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all perfect. So to say as-salam and give salutations or salute or give peace be upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wait a minute, what are you saying? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never goes into any imperfection. So what am I saying then when I'm saying at-tahiyyatu lillah? What am I doing? I'm saying that one, some scholars said al-baqa to mean at-tahiyyat to mean al-hayat. That life is all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning eternity belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And التحيات لله, since eternity belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then therefore magnificence goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because no one's eternal. And since magnificence goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He is the King. And therefore, He is the King. So even though you could say, they would say, قِيلَ الْبَقَاء قِيلَ الْعَظَمَةِ قِيلَ, etc. But they would all really go within the same area. If you're speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being eternal, then you're speaking about Him being magnificent. If you're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being magnificent, then you're actually talking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the King. So when I say التحيات لله, it's a moment of announcement. Ya Allah, I am right now coming to make the statement, the confession that You are the Eternal One. You are the Magnificent One. You are the one that I surrender to. That's at-tahiyyatu lillah. So therefore, when you're talking about taking that moment, at-tahiyyatu lillah, so therefore, I'm doing all the different kinds of recognition and submission and announcement and putting in all the statements to say, Ya Allah, You are the most magnificent one. So therefore, since I'm coming in with this testimony, then therefore, as-salawat al-tayyibat. So of course, let's see. At-tahiyyatu lillah, that was the first one. As-salawat. What's salawat? Well, what does a salawat anyways mean? So salawat means, it comes from the root salla, well basically, saliya, salwata. Which one is it? Okay. But the word, scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether this is salwata, salata, where does the waw come from, etc. So I'm not going to get into that in Lugha Arabiya, but in general, when you're looking at as-salawat, the prayers, are we talking about the prayers? Are we talking about the prayers, meaning the 5 daily prayers? Or are we talking about all the different kinds of actions that I'm obligated to do? So when I'm wearing my hijab, I'm in a state of a prayer. When I'm helping my mom in the kitchen, I'm in a state of prayer. When I'm cooking for my family, I'm in a state of prayer. When I'm doing the laundry, I'm in a state of prayer. Is that the prayer as a comprehensive word, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated me to do? Or is this a specific kind of a prayer to mean rituals alone, which is more preponderant? So this is more exclusive, is salawat to mean not the comprehensive, any type of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but is more exclusive to the different rituals, the different prayers, the different the spiritual things that you would engage in for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so for this, if this is talking about prayers and rituals, so what is al-tayyibat? Now, al-tayyibat, I want you to look at this one because there's the al again. This would be the inclusive al. Istighraqiyya. All the different kinds of the different prayers that I would do, whether I'm doing Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, or whether I'm doing the 5 daily prayers, or whether I'm doing salawat to do the dua or the invocations, or any kind of a spiritual thing that I would be doing to get closer to You, that would be a salawat. The scholars that said, no, this is more specific, they said that would be for the 5 daily prayers. What about al-tayyibat? Al-tayyibat, the word tayyib just means anything that is good, anything that is sweet, anything that is good, anything that is classified as basically acceptable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you're looking at al-tayyibat, is this to mean one, al-tayyibat, a comprehensive and inclusive wording, anything that is good, whether I'm donating money, or whether I'm helping my mother, or whether I'm being good to my husband and being patient, or whether I didn't want to talk back at my husband because I wanted to be, you know, the person that basically is putting in patience and in basically not letting my anger control me. Is that الطيبات؟ ما طاب من الكلام? The good words that I would be contributing? Or is it الطيبات, all the words that basically are to deliver good words? Whether it's praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or whether it's saying good words to people, or whether it's saying good words in things like dua, or basically a more comprehensive thing.
Is this the praising Allah like العطيرات طيبات
العطرات.
بمعناها this
Absolutely, but العطرة
العطرة
is right, but العطرة is more rhetorical. العطرة means something that has a good fragrance.
طيبة, it means
right, but
طيب,
you
from
want
طيب.
to remember this dua, we don't add things to it. We basically have a specific statement. So we don't put from our own additions, because it was mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ, so then that would be a quote. Okay? So الطيبات, is it inclusive or is it specific? That's that. But the word الطيبات basically means all the good things. So what does that mean? So all the praise goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The prayers, my prayers, the good contributions, the good words, whether that was in prayers or whether that was in actions, or whether those were words that I would say in good, they would be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So not come,
sorry. Go ahead.
الطيبات not comes from طيب.
No, الطيبات here, الطيبات, you would look into the context, and since we're talking about الصلوات, then that would mean الطيبات would be within. Remember, this is not المغايرة. This is basically coming in as عطف, to mean that it is within the same context. So طيب, الطيب would be fragrance. This has nothing to do with fragrances. So
that comes like some root from طيبات, from طيب, not no related. So this basically comes from what is طاب, what is طيب, what is good. Mm-hmm. So all the good actions, all the good contributions, anything that is good is basically a good contribution. Therefore, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to basically accept it from you as an investment for your akhirah. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك أيها النبي. Now here's one thing. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. Was that meaning you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to basically give protection and peace to the Prophet ﷺ? But he's already dead. So how is it you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi? That's why later, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, they don't say Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi. They would say Assalamu ala nabi. Okay? Assalamu ala nabi wa rahmatullah. So why don't we say Assalamu ala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is never needing protection, because he is the one that provides protection. He's the one that provides protection. Okay. All right. Let's continue right there. Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi. And like we said, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they used to say Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi. When the Prophet ﷺ when the Prophet ﷺ died, they used to say Assalamu ala nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Okay. So just to note that one. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is al-Rahmah? Al-Rahmah, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shed his mercy upon you, upon the Prophet,
So why upon the Prophet? I mean, well, the Prophet ﷺ غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ وَمَا تُؤَخَّرَ. Why am I making the dua for the Prophet ﷺ if his sins and if he's already infallible? Because when you are testifying as a person, Muslim, you are testifying, you're being committed, you're recognizing the status of the Prophet ﷺ as your celebrity, as your role model, as the one that you would carry on his legacy. That's when you would recognize that your status would be elevated based on the amount of let's say, the amount that you emulate from the Prophet ﷺ. So why the Prophet ﷺ? Because the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him as the human role model, or the prophets and messengers in general, as the human role model for people to take in order to emulate, to apply in their life. So that would be that peace, that peace for you to see, for you to touch, for you to relate to. You would take that as an example, the prophet and the messengers, you would take them as an example in order to live the human side, the human application of what makes real submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does that mean? You are taking the Prophet ﷺ as the legacy that you would cherish, as the legacy that you would embrace, and you would recognize that is what makes a true legacy. That's what makes a true role model. That's what makes the position that I would look up to. And therefore, what would increase and elevate my position really depends on the amount of embracement for that role model and how I would recognize the legacy. So if I consider that is the legacy that I would like to emulate, then in that situation, the closer I am to that legacy, the better and the higher rank I would be in this dunya and the hereafter. So that's why when you look at that one, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's go back to it right there. Okay. So, assalamu alayka ya Nabi, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon the Prophet, and assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillah salihin. And peace and blessings be upon us and upon the righteous servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that directly to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi.
No, this is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say assalamu ala assalamu alayhi. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, peace and blessings be upon me.
So it looks like as he faced the as I hear about it, it's the night of al-Mi'raj, when he entered to the Hazira al-Qudsiyya, and he say as-tahiyyatu at-tayyib lillah was-salawatu at-tayyibat. Then Allah said, talk to him, said assalamu alayka ayyuha nabiy wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I don't know if it's real or wrong. Then the malaika said, then the Prophet ﷺ response, assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin.
I'll have to see the authenticity of that one. I did come across it. I don't know the authenticity of it, but is it authentic? I don't know the authenticity of it. I will research, inshallah. But in general, when we're talking about assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillah salihin, is it necessarily the malaika, or is it more inclusive? Would be more inclusive to include alayna as us and ibadillah salihin. So the same dua that you're making to the Prophet, you're also making to yourself, you're making to the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What about, why am I making dua to the servants anyways? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had praised those that would be that would be, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Muhammad Rasulullah. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَ أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُم. They would be أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ. They would be mighty against the disbelievers, but رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُم. But they would be, they would have empathy, they would have affection, they would have
Forgiveness.
emotion. Well,
Forgive each other.
الرحمة would more be affection. You know, they would have mercy upon one another. Okay, they would have mercy upon one another. And in another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hashr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically says, in regards to Al-Ansar, that they would basically يؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة. That they would donate even if they were struggling, even if they were really living in poverty, but they would still give even though they were struggling themselves. ولو كان بهم خصاصة. Okay, so what is in a statement? Which surah is it? Right now, it's not coming across my mind, but when Ibn Taymiyyah was asked in regards to Ali ibn Abi Talib and Muawiyah, and he said those were suyuf that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those were swords that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had kept us away from engaging in. We should not engage in our tongues hurting the Prophet, the Sahaba, sorry, the companions. And he basically read the ayah in Surah Al-Hashr. In Surah Al-Hashr, is it Surah Al-Hashr or Surah Al-Fath? In Surah Al-Hashr or Surah Al-Fath, maybe I should go back to it. And what it basically says is that they would make dua for those that had passed. That Ya Rabbana la taj'al fi qulubina ghillan lilladhina amanu. Ya Allah, don't let in our hearts there be any not misery, but any hatred or any animosity towards the believers. Wait a minute. So why towards them? Is it possible that a believer and a believer, they're both believers, but they could have animosity towards one another? It's possible, but you're making the dua, وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, because that's another level. Ya Allah, don't let there be any animosity within our hearts be against the believers. Why not? Because الجنة, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِم مِّنْ غِلٍّ إِخْوَانًا عَلَى سُرُرٍ مُتَقَابِلِينَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would eliminate any animosity within their hearts, and they would be إخوانا, they would be brethrens على سُرُرٍ متقابلين. They would be sitting on benches or sitting on beds, and they would be basically متقابلين. They're facing one another, not turning their backs on one another. So when you live the Jannah in this dunya, you basically would guarantee it for you in the hereafter. So when you make the dua, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi as-salihin, what you are doing, you're taking that moment to make the dua upon you, upon the salihin. You're teaching and training yourself on how to be humble. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. I bear witness that there's no God worthy of worship but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his servant and his messenger. So what about Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad? Let's look into that one. When we say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, there is this Sahabi that actually narrated a different one. His name is Ka'b ibn Ujra. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi. So azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi is al. كما صليت على آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى أزواجه وذريته كما باركت على آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Ya Allah. So when we say صلي على Muhammad, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because when you're taking that as a high rank, that means you taking it as a role model. That's how you would want to recognize that what elevates you is basically the closer you are to this role model. The way وعلى أزواجه وذريته. In short, Ali Muhammad. Al means family. And to break it down, wives and his children. كما صليت على إبراهيم, the way that you had forgiven Prophet Ibrahim and give blessings to Prophet Muhammad and basically his family, wives and children. The way that you had blessed Ali Ibrahim, إنك حميد مجيد, for you are the one that basically Hamid, you're the one that would give the praise. You would be the one to deserve the praise, and you would also be the one to really give, and your praise is what really matters. Okay, so when we're speaking about, can I say Allahumma salli ala Umayyah, for example? I sure can. In fact, the
Yeah.
Prophet ﷺ had made the dua, Allahumma salli ala ali Abi Awfa. The Prophet ﷺ made the dua, Allahumma salli ala ali Abi Awfa. So you could definitely do that. Okay, but later it was generally exclusive, more of that takreem and that honor to actually say salli as for the prophets, more exclusive to the prophets, but you could still do it. Okay, so what is that supposed to mean? So when we say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, that's basically right there making that statement that we didn't get to the level of being as good and committed as the prophets. So Ya Allah, give him the position that he deserves because he was the one that was committed. And therefore, you're asking through this legacy, Ya Allah, elevate me because I recognize that that's what it means to be in high status. That's what it means to be a person of righteousness. That's what it means. So it's exactly like when وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى and in اللهم صل على سيدنا Muhammad, when you're talking about considering, for example, that I'm on that person's team, even though you could actually not be doing the major work, but just being on their team, that in itself is an honor. That in itself is an honor. Okay, so when we're talking about Ali Ibrahim, why Ali Ibrahim? Who's Ali Ibrahim? We're talking about Sarah, we're talking about Hajar, Ismail, Ishaq, those would be Ali Ibrahim. Same thing when we're talking about Al Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we're speaking about the family, we're talking about the wives, we're talking about the children, we're talking about that would be Ali Muhammad. So why are we including? Go
those
ahead.
al-Atra?
Those are al-Atra, absolutely. That's al-Atra, absolutely.
And out of Salah, we say Sayyidina Muhammad. Can we say it when we're doing the Tahiyyat? Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. يعني من باب الأدب والاحترام.
Right. So the word Sayyidina was not mentioned in the narrations.
Maybe
So,
because the
right.
Prophet he will not praise
Right, but
himself.
you want to stick to the narration, how it was taught by the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, so that's what we're trying to basically stick to in order to make sure that we're not adding different additions because it's Salah. So we don't want to add different things that we basically did not have. Wait a minute, so who is this Ka'b ibn Ujra? Since he was the main one that narrated this one. So I actually thought, let's look up Ka'b ibn Ujra for a little bit. He was a Sahabi, needed to look him up. Okay, And let's see, he was from Medina, and he was one of the people that did Bay'at al-Ridwan. Where's Bay'at al-Ridwan? During al-Hudaybiyah, that was in 6th-year Hijrah.
Yeah.
Okay? And he died year 52-year Hijriya. What happened? So Ka'b had said, I was with the Prophet ﷺ the day of al-Hudaybiyah, and we were in a state of ihram. Remember, they were trying to go to Umrah, but then the disbelievers, the pagan Qurashi people, they had basically prevented the Prophet ﷺ from entering the Kaaba. And he said, فَكَانَتْ لِي وَفْرَةٌ. In other words, he was really hairy, but then what happened is that lice were basically attacking him, and the lice were just going into his face. So the Prophet ﷺ comes to him and he said, are the lice basically harming you? And he said, yes, they are. It's like it's becoming too much. And remember, the scarcity of water, the heat, all of that is just becoming too hectic on him. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered him to shave. But wait a minute. If you are in a state of ihram, you can't shave. But there was an illness that he was going through. And that was the lice basically attacking him. And that's when the ayah was revealed in ayat al-Fidya. Okay, I wanted to mention that one. How did he become Muslim? Let's look at the story. Al-Waqidi mentions, okay, Ka'b ibn Ujra, he basically had an idol. And every single time that idol, he basically would just wipe on it, and he would just basically regard it as his place of blessings. And they were calling him to Islam, but he was insisting that, no, I'm fine with my faith. I'm okay. Don't need your religion, and so forth. Ubadah ibn al-Samit was his friend. So one day, Ubadah ibn al-Samit basically just was, kind of like tracing him. And when Ka'b ibn Ujra left his house, Ubadah ibn al-Samit, he basically gets an axe and breaks it. I guess he takes the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ka'b comes in and he said, who broke him? And then Ubadah, he basically comes out and it's like, he's just looking at him like, isn't it obvious? And that's when he thought about himself, and then he comes to Ubadah ibn al-Samit and basically becomes Muslim right there. That story, I guess I could see the resemblance of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. This one is rather different. Let's look at this one. Ka'b ibn Ujra, he said, I came to the Prophet ﷺ one day, and I had seen him pale from hunger. Basically, could see dehydration, hungry. And he said, by who I would sacrifice my father and mother for him, why do I see you pale and looking different? And the Prophet ﷺ said, no, I wasn't capable of eating anything for the past 3 days. He said, so I went to a Jewish guy who was irrigating or basically giving water to his own camel. And he said, well, what I'll do, I'll basically, give water for the camel. I'll basically, in other words, be the shepherd. But with every single bucket of water I would give the camel, I just want you to give me 1 date, as a pay compensation for the help that I'm doing. So he basically combined a number of different dates, and then he brought them to the Prophet ﷺ. So that's when the Prophet ﷺ tells Ka'b, do you like me? And he said, that is Ka'b, he said, bi abi anta na'am, by the one that I would sacrifice my father to him, or for him, yes. And the Prophet ﷺ, look at the statement, إِنَّ الْفَقْرَ أَسْرَعُ إِلَى مَنْ يُحِبُّنِي مِنَ السَّيْلِ إِلَى مَعَادِنِهِ وَإِنَّكَ سَيُصِيبُكَ بَلَاءٌ فَأَعِدَّ لَهُ تَجْفَافًا. إِنَّ الْفَقْرَ, that poverty would basically come faster to the person that loves me from the sayla ila ma'adini. So when you're talking about the water basically going in its path, and he told him, you're going to have some struggles coming to you. فَأَعِدَّ لَهُ تَجْفَافًا. In other words, get yourself prepared. There's going to come a time where you're really going to have a financial crisis, or you're going to go through some hardship. What is that supposed to mean? That if you're a believer, wait a minute, so if I thought Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِذَا أَحَبَّ الْمُؤْمِنِ ابْتَلَاهُ. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves a believer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would put him
Yes,
in a state of ibtila, in a state of hardship. Why would he do that? It's because
yes.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was closing the doors, all the doors that you would probably hold on to, except one door, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Is it a kind of test like shakiran
It's a
or
test.
kafura? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. But I want you to look at this one. فَأَعِدَّ لَهُ تَجْفَافًا. It's like اخشوشنوا فإن النعمة لا تدوم.
yeah, to do.
You don't want to always think that everything's supposed to be easy. Sometimes you have to get yourself to reducing the amount of foods, probably the amount of intake, probably the amount of ease that you're living in. Sometimes you really need to put yourself in some hardship and take away a lot of the eases in order to be capable of adjusting when the situations go harder and harsher on you. قال ففقده النبي. Then the Prophet ﷺ, all of a sudden, he was like, well, where's Ka'b ibn Ujrah? I haven't seen him in a while. So they said he's ill. So the Prophet ﷺ comes to him and he says, Abshir ya Ka'b. He said, the Prophet ﷺ tells Ka'b, glad tidings, there's something good coming to you. But his mother says, Hani'an lakal Jannah. You're going to get to Jannah. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Man hadihi al-muta'alliyatu ala Allah? Who's the one that's basically going to claim things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say? So he said, that's my mother. And he said, Ka'b, how do you know? You never would know. You could never, in other words, guarantee that this person's going to go to Jannah. Because you would never know. Maybe Ka'b had said something or probably prevented something that he wasn't supposed to be doing, and he's going to be held accountable for that.
Allahu
You
Akbar.
never know. Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi.
خيف.
مخيف جدا.
لا إله إلا
مخيف
الله.
جدا. And this is the person that was loving the Prophet ﷺ.
Then how it end? We need the end.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ya ilaha illallah. I would be, Ya Allah, Ya Allah,
Ya Rabbi.
Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi. All right. So this is.
And what happened to him? To Ka'b? How he died? Muslim?
So he basically died, let's see right there, 52-year Hijriya. Yeah, he died as a Muslim. طبعا صحابي.
الحمد لله. إنما إيش يختبر الذهب بالنار.
Absolutely.
Allah test these people with the very harsh things.
Absolutely. So when I'm saying Allahumma, going back to Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, what am I really holding on to? I'm not only holding on to the Prophet, I'm also holding on to the legacy. So I'm basically saying, Ya Allah, let the words of the legacy, the words of Islam, the words of the teachings that the Prophet ﷺ had basically taught us, all of that, let that be the legacy that we would hold on to. Let that be the word that would basically be the commitment that I would engage in attaching myself to and spreading. And you're basically making also the dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Judgment Day would also give you the intercession privilege, or at least to get the privilege to be amongst those that the Prophet ﷺ would intercede for, okay, to basically get to ash-shafa'ah. So when is a shafa'ah? Shafa'ah is basically at one point, we talked about it before, one point when Yawm al-Qiyamah, they've been standing for a long time, then they would basically want to expedite starting starting the hisab basically and being accountable in order to basically come to the following stage. They've been standing for a long time. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ makes the long dua, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, would tell him, rise, ishfa' tushaffa', sal tu'ta, washfa' tushaffa'. Make the dua and sal tu'ta, and ask and you would be granted. Okay, so that's basically that interpretation and what that contains in terms of Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Okay, so that's basically seeking at-tabarruk. What is at-tabarruk? At-tabarruk is like seeking barakah. It's seeking, basically wanting to connect to the blessings. In other words, when you're looking at the legacy, you're saying, Ya Allah, I want to be included in this life to be the person that carries the legacy, and in the hereafter to be amongst those that would be included in getting the intercession. Make me as part of those that are on his team, on the path, those that would emulate the Prophet ﷺ. So this is it, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim. So why Prophet Ibrahim? Why Prophet Ibrahim? Because Prophet Ibrahim, Abul Anbiya, he's basically the father of the prophets. Which prophets? Prophet Ibrahim. Prophet Ibrahim was the prophet of Prophet Ismail and Prophet Prophet Ishaq alayhi salam, and therefore, of course, even Bani Israel and would basically go back through that as well. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would also basically go through that. And Prophet Ibrahim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically described him as awahun halim.
Is it because Ya Rabbi, remember the ayah that he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ibrahim alayhi salam, to be mentioned through all his zuriyah till the end of the world, so he put his tahiyyat.
Well, right. But in general, إن الله اصطفى آدم ونوح وآل إبراهيم وآل عمران على العالمين. So you could see اصطفى آدم too, اصطفى نوح too, and آل إبراهيم and آل عمران. So you could see that there is that selection, that who actually had made the best resemblance of what it means to be awahun halim, what it means to be in submission, what it means to be in ibadah, what it means to embrace the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's Prophet Ibrahim.
Ibrahim asked it specifically from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Right there.
I can't remember it, but
I hear you. It's in Surah Al-Safat.
Yeah. What he said?
I can't remember it right now. It's up my mind.
Yeah, today before I was studying it, I make search on it, and I said for that he put him here, his remembrance in our salawat, subhanallah. He's the only prophet that asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make him in through his zuriyah.
We'll do that. How about we do that research, because I don't want to be you. Let's do it. Let's see what the ayah that is, and inshallah we'll end it
before I do.
الله يحفظك يا ربي. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. If there are any questions other than that one I'll have to do the homework for. So inshallah we'll get to that one. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them inshallah.
بارك الله بك وبعلمك ما شاء الله.
آمين يا رب. الله يحفظك.
اللهم أعطنا ما أعطيته يا رب.
آمين يا ربي. So this is it, inshallah. We'll see you all tomorrow. Stay tuned.